Spider-Man, Spider-Man, he likes chicken, he likes ham. It was me the whole time. I know, shocking, right? A Puerto Rican Spider-Man. Who would have thought? Not I. Hey guys, welcome to another exciting episode of my life. So today I'm going to talk about the thing that everybody's talking about. Hold on, let me get my ghetto mic. There we go. Oh, it won't. This is embarrassing. I've been doing videos on the internet for like 11 years and I'm still unprofessional. Why don't I have a mic stand? I'm getting one. Leave me alone. I'm just going to hold this the whole time. You go on the internet? Spider-Man. The Twitter, the Instagram, the Tumblr still. Because no one goes on that site, spoilers everywhere. They messy. Remember 2015? A simpler time, a happier time. So I actually went to go see Spider-Man the day it premiered. Actually, no, the day before. I was expecting like a midnight premiere. I was just like, okay, it's gonna be like the Harry Potter releases. You're gonna go in the middle of the night, just get excited at 12 o'clock, boom, you get in your seats, and that's the first thing you do as soon as it happens. You know what? Midnight premieres aren't a thing. It's like, it's a premiere at 6:30 in the afternoon the day before. I'm like, I mean, to me, it takes out the fun and the magic, but other than that, it's all good. It's fine, because this movie... It did all that for me. It did all that for me and more. I have my reaction video for the trailer. If you saw that, I honestly wasn't that excited for it because I'm just like, okay, so you have the villains back from the old movies. The person I was most excited to see was not only just Doc Ock, Willem Dafoe, because I knew the Green Goblin, if not by Willem Dafoe, he's gonna kill it. He's gonna kill it, especially with the tie-ins with the MCU. I'm like, I don't want him to go away. I want him to be the Green Goblin forever. He is the role. He is the Green Goblin. I don't see how they could have did it any differently. But yeah, as much as I wanted to see the movie, I wasn't that excited because I'm just like, all right, you know, it's a Spider-Man movie. It's been done a million times, but this movie exceeded any expectations I had. It really tried to do the most they could, and honestly, I think this is the movie that honestly solidified Tom Holland as Spider-Man. Like, this is the movie that sold it for me, not Mr. Stark, I don't want to go. No, this is the one. He actually fully embodies every element of Peter Parker. You really feel it here. You really see it. Everything about it is just so good. Of course, there's flaws with it, and I'm going to get into that mostly when I get to the spoiler portion of this. How I'm going to review it, I'm going to talk about the normal review first, so if you don't want any spoilers, you're fine. I'll leave a timestamp for when the spoilers start. When I get to the spoiler review, there's so much to talk about. Woo! So let's start with a non-spoiler review. So as I said before, like, I'm a huge Spider-Man fan, so when Why are you disturbing my time? My effort, my energy. It's my brother. I went with him and we've been talking about Spider-Man the entire time. Who else are we gonna talk about? Unless you've seen the movie. Honestly, the character acting in this movie is amazing. I feel like everyone just like well executed. The reason why the villains tie into the MCU universe, how Tom Holland really tries to take it to the next level with getting every element of Peter Parker I talked about before. But also the characters such as Ned and Zendaya, who's playing MJ, they really hone in on key elements of Peter Parker and really are essential to this character's worth. I feel like it was kind of loose with the other ones. Like Homecoming, I'm just like, Ned, why you here? He said some ha-has and hee-hees and that's it. I'm just like, okay. We have comic relief on top of comic relief. And then he's just like, oh, I'm the guy in the chair. I'm just like, why he got a guy in the chair for? He already has a robot suit that does everything for him. And no, and then he gets the suit taken away. He's just like, oh, Mr. Stark. I'm nothing without the suit, Mr. Stark. Meanwhile, they're gonna make a whole MCU show right now on Peter Parker's freshman year. So I'm like, you were Spider-Man for months? But now, all of a sudden, oh, I'm nothing without the suit. I'm just like, but you were Spider-Man already. I actually wanted to do and I will do a full video on the best live-action Spider-Man movie. I was going to do it before this movie released, but I didn't have time. But I'm glad I kind of waited because the way this movie plays out and the way it's actually handled, my answer completely changed. The real answer of what I was going to say the best live-action Spider-Man was none of them. And leave it at that. But this one really actually solidified Tom Holland for me. I always thought he was a great actor. I always thought he was really coming into his own character, his own version or own rendition of this. For someone who grew up reading the comics, playing the games, and doing all these things, like, this was like one of my first comics when I was little. This era, the 70s era, this is the one that feels like the most like classic and most like Spider-Man to me. And he kind of nails it. Everything with this script is amazing. Pun intended. I'll see myself out. But between him, his relationship with Aunt May, hot Aunt May, who's just like, this old frumpy lady, she banging now. Why you do this? And his relationship with MJ, it really seems well established and it's very supportive and strong in a way way that we haven't really seen that well since Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone. I'd say MJ and, Kristen Stewart and Tobey Maguire, but like, let's be real. I love them both. I think they were great for the movie. I'm going to talk more about it later, but this relationship really feels like a power play. Like, it really feels like a power couple that kind of, it works, and they support each other, and they grow from each other, and they understand each other. Like, they kind of get the situation, but the chaos that's caused by Peter Parker's identity being revealed, you really feel connected to an actual Peter Parker. I feel like he's actually struggling with Peter Parker issues. I think in Homecoming, he was just like, oh, I want to hang out in the jacuzzi with my friends, but I have to be Spider-Man. Oh, it's hard. And we see more in Far From Home a little bit, like tease more too, just like being Peter Parker and wanted to be with MJ, but Nick Fury wants him to go do superhero things. Just like, oh, but I want to do both, but it's hard for me. Oh, that's mostly the essential everything of Peter Parker. It's a struggle. He has great power. And it comes great responsibility. Peter Parker doesn't always or feel the need to want to be Spider-Man. It's a obligation to him. He feels like he has to be Spider-Man, and if he's not, and something happens or someone dies because of it, or he could have prevented something from being Spider-Man and it happens anyway, then it's his fault. He blames himself. So it's kind of like a moral obligation to be Spider-Man rather than a want. And that's what they are kind of going in with Homecoming, just like, oh, like, I just want to help everyone. I just want to be good. I'm just like, ah. Peter Parker got bit by a spider, and he's just like, how can I make money off of this? Yeah. That's like a realistic view. Let's be real. I don't care how good of a person you are. I don't care how much charity you donate, how many non-for-profits you work for. You get some superpowers, you gonna think, how can I profit off of this? Monetize now, please. Support my Patreon. Starts an OnlyWebs account. And to talk about the villains, Willem Dafoe, and I've said this a million times, is the best Spider-Man villain that we've ever seen. And I've said this since the original Spider-Man movies, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. I watched that like every 2 months and was like, yo, we got marathon some Spider-Man right now. Whoever I'm with, I'm just like, you get ready. Willem Dafoe really knows the character. He agreed to do these movies if he can do his own stunts. And it just feels more realistic. You know Willem Dafoe is very dedicated to the character and is a arch antagonist for Spider-Man, hands down. He feels like the Green Goblin. Because the big villains who really challenge Peter, the ones who really like get under his skin and not only deal with the fact of him being Spider-Man, trying to stop him that way, and also play into the fact that he has that dual identity and they're able to fuck with him both ways. Norman Osborn and Doc Ock really have been able to do that in the comics, as well as like Kraven the Hunter, which I'll get to later. I'm going to talk about Kraven. Like Willem Dafoe, I'm just like, he should have been here. And honestly, him being on the big screen and him being against everyone and just like his motivation and his ruthlessness, I'm just like, yo, where were you? This is what the MCU needed. It feels different than any villain that we've seen before. And it really does. It just has this weird, classic, kind of nostalgic, but this is a villain who really wants what he wants and really wants to destroy his enemy. That's the thing that he has most in mind. Not just like physically, but mentally as well. He wants to completely mess him up. Thanos won his pretty little rocks. I'm like, okay, I get that. Yeah, you do that. He looks like the California raisin, but I don't know. But he thick though. Yeah, thick California raisin. I'm like, you know what? Would I? Yes. Killmonger had his old moral complex. You know, I get it, but also maybe extreme, bruh. Maybe a little bit. But I feel like this one is just like, it's probably one of the best villains. It's also another villain who's not just a copy and paste. I don't know what the MCU, but they're like, nah. You're gonna have the protagonist powers, but you're gonna be like the dark skin version. It's been Link versus Dark Link every climactic battle. I'm just like, all right. So this has been so refreshing because the Spider-Man villains are very much their own. How they come into the universe and how they connect and how they have a relationship with Peter Parker. You really understand that, you really feel that, and you can see that they're their own people. Like, it works. And obviously there's some hiccups with it. There's some things that logistically don't make sense, even if you try to justify it. There's a whole segment where they're kind of sidelined. It's just like, they're just there. And I'm just like, wow, they're just there. And that's it. But the reasoning for forming a collective and the reasoning for actually like fighting a giant climactic battle with them, it does make sense. It does add up. The final fight, I'm just like, I kind of wanted a little bit more, but I'm glad they kind of used every element of not just like Peter Parker, but also Zendaya and Ned also like play a huge big role in it, and they also like kind of like help out. So we actually see all aspects of Peter Parker's arsenal, even his friends. It just works as a good movie. I would recommend seeing the original Raimi trilogy, like with Tobey Maguire. Yo, my boy, he's my boy. I mean, you could watch Andrew Garfield. You really don't have to. I'm sorry, I shit on those movies so much, and I love Andrew Garfield, and he is a good Spider-Man. He's always been, and I always say, the casting for those movies, good. The writing for those movies, terrible. God-awful. What were they doing? 10 minutes in to Amazing Spider-Man 2, and I'm just like, where's Spider-Man? Why is it on a plane? Why is he Liam Neeson? Where's my family? It was a spy movie. I was confused. I was scared. I don't know. Those movies with the villains and everything tie into this, and it makes a lot of sense. Like, I feel the connection to the characters. I feel the connection to the comic books. Even though this isn't really based off, like, a huge story arc, it's kind of like a bunch of different elements from a bunch of different comics. A big one being one moment in time, Peter Parker reveals his identity during Civil War, basically sells his marriage in order to save Aunt May from being shot. That's in the comic. And when they reset the universe, they make another story to explain what happened in that universe to break up Peter Parker and MJ, and that comic's terrible. It's not good. It's like so stupid. It's basically just like Peter Parker missed the wedding, and then they had an on and off relationship for a bit, and then he goes to Doctor Strange being just like, oh, kind of like erase anyone's knowledge of him being Spider-Man, and it's like a whole thing, and it's just weird. It's just because the comic book writers just like, nah, we want single Peter Parker, because comic book writers do not want characters married. I don't know why. They're just like, this is hard to write. No one cares about people being single anymore. You want to make, I mean, you have a whole bunch of kids. Peter Parker's a grown-ass man. He's like nearing like what? Canonically, like he's in his late 20s. Let him be happy. He's allowed. But overall, this movie's amazing. Yeah, there's some hiccups, of course. There's always going to be. I can't really get into them until I get to the spoiler review. It's really heartfelt. It really pulls on the heartstrings. And the way this movie ends, not to spoil anything, but it really sets up for Peter Parker coming into his own, really developing into his own Spider-Man, like away from everything set up from Tony Stark, away from everything set up from Homecoming and Far From Home. It's really just him dealing with actually being Spider-Man, which is what I've wanted to see for the longest time. This movie really sets up for that, and I'm excited for the next movies. And I don't say that often. I honestly would rank this movie probably, it plays such a classic tribute to the original Spider-Man movies and everything that Spider-Man kind of stands for, so I really have to put this movie, it's one of my favorites. Even for me, it might be above Spider-Verse. I'm not sure yet, because I haven't seen the movie a couple of times, because right now, like, I'm still kind of hyped. So I had to watch the movie a couple of times to really get a good review going and really actually like, okay, let me clear my feelings. Let me actually watch it. Because when you're on the hype train, everything looks so much better than it does. I'm like, ooh, is this movie good though? Or am I just hyped? Is it the cocaine's feeling? Like, what's happening? It's like when you're like, you know, you go to a bar, you're kind of drunk, you messed up. You look at someone, you're like, ooh, they cute. Maybe I should. Then the lights come on, you sober up, and you realize, what have I done? I can't say that with this movie. I mean, there's some parts that are very event-based, because that's the thing with event movies, and I'll talk about that later too. But sometimes with like event movies, and this was like an event movie, kind of like an Endgame or Infinity War and whatnot. Oh wait, in the moment, I'm just like, yo, this works. But then when I look back and I'm just like, this really only works for like, to get the same reaction for in the theater. Because you watch it at home, you watch it on Netflix, it's like, I mean, cool, but like, we just kind of stop the movie for this. In order to rope this in, we kind of like stop the movie to weave a thread. I'm like, okay. But overall, I honestly, I love this movie. It makes me feel like a Spider-Man fan again. It makes me really feel like I love the series, because I feel like there hasn't been like a Spider-Man that really connected me since the Raimi movies, since the Spider-Man PS4 video game, because I'm just like, oh, okay, this feels like Spider-Man. And the Spider-Man we got was just like Tom Holland going like, Mr. Stark, and I'm like, so this is what we got. This is what we're working with. Okay. Honestly, you gotta see it. You gotta. So that's it for my non-spoiler review. Overall, amazing movie. Go see it, please. If you just like action, you like adventure, you like a little thriller, and you like something that really pulls at heartstrings. This movie kind of has that. You're definitely gonna be lost if you're not a Spider-Man fan. No, but once you actually relate to the characters and actually like kind of like fall into the universe, it does work. So I'm gonna talk about the spoiler review. So all you non-spoiler people, go away, go home. Yeah, done. We gonna get into it. This is the one I really want to talk about.
They're starting to come through, and I can't stop them.
Alright, are they gone? Can't talk about spoilers. Can we spoil the movie now? Doing that review while not being able to talk about anything. Yo. And I know some people there is like, nah. We gotta split this into 2 videos because like, yeah, let me get that extra monetization. I'm like, no, we gonna talk about this now. We gotta talk about this today. I'm not editing 2 videos. I ain't got time for that. I am tired. Or should I record 2 videos? We'll decide. If this is broken apart 1, part 2, I don't fucking know. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know who I am, but this movie really fucking sold me. And I wasn't that excited because before I was just like, okay, nah. At least we get the Sonic movie. Okay. Everyone knew what was gonna happen, and for the most part, I'm like, okay, we're gonna know, and I'll talk about it. Then we're gonna get some Spider-Man action because there were some leaks, there's some things, and I don't get the Marvel MCU. I know they want to keep things secret. I know they want to keep things to themselves. Like, okay, yeah, we gotta keep things on the down low, everything. Kevin Feige is like hiring assassins to shut people up. I know he is. He's watching from the rooftops right now. No, if you get that Marvel Disney contract, nah, you in danger, girl. And with the kidnapping, sometimes they kidnap actors that's like, you don't know. They get the chloroform and there's like, you wake up 3 days later, dazed and confused, in a cell, and they're like, read the script. Fucking weird. I couldn't do it. I don't know. I'm just like, Kevin Feige, you on some shit. You know what? That also is good marketing. The fans will speculate, the fans will do things, and the fans will hype these things up. That's why they made such bad posters. We all know the posters are terrible. They did that on purpose. They're like, nah, we don't have to try about this. Because the fans, they're gonna make better posters. They're gonna do the most because they're passionate about it. And you know what? They're gonna get the hype train going. We're gonna get more people coming in just to see what's this movie about, and we don't get that money. Kevin Feige, evil genius, cause it fucking worked. This movie delivered in every aspect. I want to start from the very beginning, even setting the tone with the events taking place from the last movie, having Peter Parker and Mary Jane, well, basically Mary Jane, and we'll get to that, but just swing around the city after everyone finds out he's Spider-Man, and it feels like an old school, like, Spider-Man skit. But we also see the repercussions of that. Everyone close to him is affected by that. Aunt May can't live in her home anymore. Zendaya gets rejected from school and can't get in. Same thing with Ned. Their lives are essentially over for the most part. It's Peter Parker's fault. He feels guilty about this. And this is what we haven't seen in Spider-Man movies. And it's so long. I'm just like, Peter Parker's guilt. Peter Parker's moral obligation to try to be better than. Peter Parker's repercussions for being Spider-Man is repercussions for not being Spider-Man. This is the thing he struggles with the most. This is the thing that makes Spider-Man Spider-Man. And we actually got to see it. I'm just like, this is what I wanted. So he goes to Doctor Strange, does the whole thing. He's like, please fix this. And even Doctor Strange is like, did you actually talk to the school though to see if you get into college? Like, did you try to fight for the acceptance? He's just like, oh, you can do that. Peter Parker could just like did the normal human thing and talk to the admission office to get his school, to get his friends into school and into MIT, their dream school. Doctor Strange is like, so you gonna try to rewrite the whole universe when you could have just did that? Kicks him out. That was so good because there has been flaws with the MCU logic. I feel like sometimes like the characters have this higher than thou kind of complex and they just really don't even think logically with things or really just like use their full capability as humans and just rely so much on their superpowers when they could just did the simple thing and it would have been fine. I think this is actually my favorite MCU movie, and yes, I'm including Infinity War and Endgame. I don't give a fuck. It's really nice to actually see the time jump, really get to see his personal life being affected by everything that's going on and basically being villainized and accused of being a murderer. And we get to see Daredevil. I'm just like, we all knew it was happening, but the fact that we got to see Charlie Cox is back. Is it Charlie Cox? Is that his name? I always get Charlie Cox and Charlie Day confused in my head. I'm like, imagine that Charlie Day is Daredevil. I mean, he's Luigi, so let's get that. Mario, I don't know. We just had a... You ever see a toad and you think, don't they look like a little chub? And it's nice that they throw that in because we basically have the original cast from Daredevil. I just hope, why don't they just make the Daredevil show on Netflix canon? And I hope they don't start from the origin again and work their way back up because don't try to rewrite it. It was already meant to be part of the MCU originally. just keep it. It doesn't have to tie into everything, which I always hate. And it becomes an ongoing trope that the MCU movies feel like they always have to tie into each other. They always has to be some sort of connection with different elements or different plots or different characters. Everything has to tie in together. That's one of the things that DC actually has an advantage of, because DC Comics and their movies, they know they're a fuck up. They know they messed up trying to like build up their own MCU. So they just do one-offs. That is just one-off stories of that character. It's their one-off adventure. It actually just them. They don't have to tie into, oh, what's Batman doing with Wonder Woman or X, Y, and Z, because they tried that and it was a failure. And sometimes MCU relies too much on that. And I'm just like, please stop. Matt Murdock actually helping out with this case, that makes sense, and you don't have to elaborate further. You don't have to really go into, oh, but Daredevil's gonna help. Daredevil's gonna be a part of this. No, because it's just a one-off thing. He's a person who exists in that universe, and then he does his own thing. That's how it should be. And I kind of like that this feels like a standalone Spider-Man movie. Even though, of course, Doctor Strange plays a part in this, he doesn't play so much of a role that it takes over the movie. It's very much a Spider-Man Peter Parker story, just featuring Doctor Strange. We don't have a lot of just Peter Parker dealing with Peter Parker issues, because it always has a tie into, what's Iron Man doing? Who's the next Iron Man? What's going on there? I don't like when they have to force a character to be in and it completely takes over the plot. Even the fight with Doctor Strange, that was so good. And the fact that Peter Parker actually relied on his smarts and intelligence to beat Doctor Strange, we don't see a lot of that. A lot of it's him relying either on Ned or his brute strength or his Peter Tangle, which I'm so glad they did not say Peter Tangle. They just did the tingly thing. Thank you. Develop it as a spider sense. Call it that. I'm sick of the Peter Tangle. Please stop. Also, a lot of people were wondering, like, you know, it was the Sinister Six. Well, it's supposed to be a take on the Sinister Six. Sinister Six. I cannot pronounce S's and words. I don't know. So a lot of people are just like, you know, oh, who's the sixth villain? Because it's supposed to be like their take on the Sinister Six from like interdimensional multiverse magic. And there was 6 villains technically. I thought it was gonna be Venom. I thought they were really gonna like try to tie him in. I'm like, all right, I want to see how this works out. The 6th villain was Doctor Strange, because he tries to stop Peter Parker. Peter Parker and his overall goal, especially with the help of Aunt May, and Aunt May being the influence, saying that these are just people. They can't go home to die. And the introduction of Doc Ock on the bridge, I'm just like, this is, I mean, you saw it in the trailer a million times. And the villains work so well in this universe, even the Amazing Spider-Man universe, because like they even point out how fucking ridiculous they are. I feel like the Amazing Spider-Man villains, especially the Lizard, whose plot is to, I guess it's like, you know, the comics, but he just wants to turn people into lizards. That's his ongoing thing. That's his one trait. This don't really work in live action. He is like the weakest villain here. But the introduction of Doc Ock on the bridge, it really, even if you saw it on the trailer, it still hit. And you get to see like Peter Parker kind of struggle with trying to save the admission lady he was trying to talk to, and fighting Doc Ock at the same time. And of course the nanotechnology came into play. I kind of knew that was going to be a thing, which was fine. It kind of like ended Doc Ock right there. But when they were trying to rehabilitate all the characters and rehabilitate the villains so they don't die when they get back, which I'll get to that because there's a lot of loopholes there. When they actually fixed the inhibitor chip and actually like stabilized Doc Ock, because Doc Ock in Spider-Man 2 was just a guy controlled by his arms and given so much into his own narcissism and insecurity and perfectionism. Stabilizing him, you get a solid guy. That's why he's been such a complex character. And that's why I was really happy he gets his retribution. He gets to actually just be a guy again. But even with Sandman, because where these villains were taken from specific moments in time, and Sandman was obviously taken right after Spider-Man 3, where Peter Parker lets him go. He's like, I forgive you. Because he actually tries to help Peter Parker fight Electro, and he only turns against them because he doesn't really trust anyone. He doesn't trust this version of Peter Parker. It's a universe he doesn't understand, and he just wants to get home to his daughter, which was his whole plot in Spider-Man 3, so that makes sense. The only thing that doesn't make sense is, why Jamie Foxx looking like a snack now? He went from looking all messed up to just like any given Sunday. And speaking of like when the characters were taken, and this is one of the flaws, because you have to think when the actual characters were taken, that way when they go back, they get saved. I don't know if that resets their memory or they forget, tied into like the ending spell where Doctor Strange makes everyone forget he's Peter Parker. Does that also work multi-dimensional? I don't know. We're not really talking about it. Doc Ock was taken right before he drowns himself, basically. The machine that he made, the power of the sun in the palm of his hands, the Sunny D, was still still going to destroy New York City, so they'd still have to drown it. So he'd still have to probably sacrifice himself. So I'm just like, he probably still gonna die. Just putting that out there. Also, a Green Goblin going back. I'm like, okay, if Green Goblin went back like during the final fight with Tobey Maguire in Spider-Man 1, which I think is when he was taken. Okay, so they don't have that fight scene, and he doesn't use the glider to kill himself. So that doesn't trigger James Franco to want revenge on Spider-Man, and Norman Osborn's still alive, so he's probably still CEO of Oscorp. So with him being CEO, he would probably help Otto Octavius create the formula of the machine and help him out with that, so there probably isn't even a spike, which would lead to the death of his wife, which would lead to the fusion of his arm, so probably Doc Ock wouldn't really exist, and that also means that James Franco as the Green Goblin getting revenge for his father also wouldn't exist. So when Peter Parker eventually fights the Sandman and Venom is about to stab Peter Parker, James Franco's not going to get in the way. So Peter Parker is probably going to get stabbed, so we're going to get rid of Doc Ock in that universe, and Peter Parker's getting stabbed. I'm just saying, if you really think about just like, you know, this pulling and plucking and putting them back, I'm just like, I said it was going to happen because I said they're going to Kingdom Hearts this bullshit, which is how time travel works in Kingdom Hearts. If you haven't played, it's messy and it's confusing, and I'm just like, alright. And this is why you don't really mess with like taking people out of time and then putting them back in specific moments, because like you really have to think about it, because like logically this don't make no sense. What? Like maybe I'm thinking too much about it, but it's like that's the problem with time travel and interdimensional travel if you're not going to have the characters either come from parallel universes of specific universes. Because, like, if these are parallel universes to the movie universe, fine. But if they're just like, no, they're from the same universe, I'm like, no, they're not. They are not. No. But I do actually like the rehabilitation phase. I feel like it goes on for a little too long and kind of like slows down the pacing of the movie. I'm like, okay, there's not that much happening now. We're just waiting for the Green Goblin to turn because, let's face it, that was obvious. Like, any of the villains were going to turn. I know that they try to like hype up maybe Electro just because he doesn't want to like lose his power. Sure, that was going to happen anyway, but he wasn't going to he probably wasn't going to do anything. But Norman Osborn, this is him playing the whole bipolar complex and waiting for his opportune moment. And that's the Green Goblin. And when he does that turn, everything goes to shit, and it's just amazing. Like, it's just perfect. Fully unleashes as being the Green Goblin in a way we never really seen before. Because like a lot of people are just like, oh, you know, maybe he's overpowered, or maybe he's just like way too strong, or like way too much. Like, I don't remember him being like this in the first Spider-Man movie, but this is the thing. This is the first time we actually see the Green Goblin be completely unhinged, because he has nothing to lose. No matter what he does, he's going back to die. And this is the Green Goblin, not Norman Osborn, but like they either cure Norman Osborn of the Green Goblin, so there'll never be a Green Goblin, that's it, or they send him back just how he is and he's gonna die. So he thinks either way he's gonna die. So what he does with this is, let me fuck with Peter Parker. Let me make his life a living fucking hell, because what do I have to lose? I'm sick of this self-righteous bastard trying to cure and save everyone. This is about me. I'm gonna get what I want, and what I want is to manipulate this person so bad, hurt him so bad mentally, physically, and emotionally that he wants to kill me. He's going to lose his moral compass. I'm going to completely corrupt him, and he's going to become something dark and evil because of me. And Green Goblin went all out. And with that in mind, he's one of the best MCU villains that we have seen. I don't care if you're a fan of Killmonger or the purple Raisinette with the pretty stones. This sold me. Because once you think about it, like, the MCU villains are like kind of like, eh? They're either like copy and paste of the hero, but you know, just evil. Or they're Thanos, or Killmonger has a complex. But other than that, what we got in the MCU? They all dead, except Red Skull. He's a ghost for some reason. I don't fucking know. Yeah, he is the MCU now. Like, this is Norman Osborn, which I'm just like, yeah. Which works into the comics as well too. Like, Norman Osborn isn't just a Spider-Man villain at a certain point. He's an overall villain. Like, everyone has shit with them. Iron Man, Captain America, the Avengers, like, he becomes Carnage at the point. He's that bitch. I'm sorry. What really got me was the fact that they really, and me and my brother, we looked at each other as soon as she said this, but Aunt May being the moral compass in Peter Parker's life, looking at him and saying, with great power comes great responsibility. The minute she said that, I felt this like calming and also sad and also like this cathartic feeling and a little bit of dread because I knew what was going to happen. You say those words to a Peter Parker, that's it. You're done. And I'm just like, she's gonna die. And they killed May. And I'm just like, these directors really played Spider-Man for the PS4, huh? Because she worked for Feast. She won the best for everybody. And then she dies. I'm like, I played this game before, but okay. But even seeing that and seeing how much it hurt Peter and really living that and how much he seeked revenge from it, I'm just like, yo, that's the moment where I'm just like, this is Peter Parker. This is Spider-Man. Tom Holland is nailing it. He's doing it. He is Spider-Man. I had my qualms in the past, but I'm like, no, this is what he needed to really let go and unleash. And then going into like the big like reveal, the whole like fucking endgame moment where it's like, you know, fucking magic circle, someone pops out. I'm just like, all right, first of all, we've seen this before. I mean, in the theater, when I first saw it, I was hyped. I was jumping from a seat. I was clapping. I shit and pissed everywhere. I had heart complications. I looked like Aunt May. I was revived in the theater. I was sliding up the Montero pole. I'm just like, no, Lil Nas. I came back to life. But, and this is what we're going to talk about before, my problem with event movies, and MCU likes to do this. Now, an event movie is different from like a normal movie, because like a normal movie, you go, you enjoy the moment, but also a similar experience that you get away from theaters as you do in theaters. So just like the way you feel about certain aspects, certain scenes, certain characters, it just works into the story. With event movies though, they just want that reaction. They want that pussy popping moment. They want that coming of Jesus moment. Freaking, all right, let's break down this scene, because I have issues with it. I mean, I love it. I feel for it. I feel like every character in it, especially Ned's grandma, great addition, because it really ties into that feeling of Spider-Man, how everything's kind of like nonsense and comedic, but also consistent with that serious tone. I'm like, all right, this kind of fits the universe. But first of all, let's talk about how Ned does magic now. He took the ring. I'm just like, okay, so let me get this straight. Every Asian character in the MCU, every main Asian character can do magic now. And I'm just like, I'm not saying that's like a race thing, but I'm just saying it's a weird coincidence. But besides that, it just feels like it's kind of just easy to do things, huh? Just like, okay, no training, no nothing. Just like, okay, he can just do the magic because he has the ring. His one flaw is he can open a portal but not close it because he doesn't have the training or the professionalism. He could still open the portal. That seems like that would be hard to do, but okay. And they call in Peter Parker, and we get Lasagna Boy Jones, Andrew Garfield. I'm just like, oh, he hates Mondays, but I'm glad he's here. Everyone on Twitter is just like, yo, I want to see Amazing Spider-Man 3. Yo, bring back Andrew Garfield. Yo, this is what we need. Andrew Garfield Spider-Man versus Tom Hardy's Venom. I think the casting for Amazing Spider-Man movies, besides Harry Osborn, was great. I mean, I really felt for the characters. Andrew Garfield, this is one of his iconic roles for him, and he really loved the role. But the script was god-awful. It was bad. The Amazing Spider-Man script is bad. The second one is worse. A lot of it's just like Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone ad-libbing, where they're just like... you're so, like, he doesn't even say words. He's not saying a sentence. He just makes noises at her. And I'm going to talk about this later in another video, but I was so happy to see him. And so happy to see him with a fucking good script and actually good character development, where it's just like, okay, great. This is how Spider-Man could have been. This is how the Amazing Spider-Man movies could have been with a fucking competent Peter Parker. This is what I wanted. And I feel so good for Andrew Garfield for this role. And I'm just so happy to see him back and actually being a person, not just like a weird, twitchy, whatever that was, because I didn't like it. It was bad. And then we see it, my boy, Tobey Maguire, the king, the fucking best. And he's aged, he's weathered, and I love that. I do. I'm glad they didn't do any like de-aged CGI. I'm glad they didn't like try to like make him more buff and anything, because he is a Peter Parker who has done it all. He has been there, he has lived his life, and he even says that he and MJ finally made it work, and they're just like happy together and they're stable. I'm just like, this is the Peter Parker, this is the older Peter Parker that I want. He has the wisdom, he gives Tom Holland advice, and if there was a way to tie in these people into the MCU somehow, I mean, if they Spider-Verse it, sure, that'd be great. It works for Tobey Maguire's character. Like, this is what you do to Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. Like, you make him older, you make him weathered, you make him the mentor character, and I'm so happy they did that with him. But going back to what I said about event movies and this whole thing with a fucking magic ring, which, why is that a reoccurring thing? There's like, okay, on your left. I'm like, okay, cool. I guess everybody's just on their left. On the left, on the right, everywhere. And I love seeing the interaction between Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man finally meeting. Like, same move, in sync. Perfect introduction. But the thing that irks me a little bit about this ongoing event movie trope, even though like they try to tie it into the story, just like, okay, Ned learns magic, does the magic ring thing, people just walk in, just like, oh, we got the Peter Parker, let's get the other Peter Parker. Oh, we got all the Peter Parkers. And they didn't try like trying to do it a third time, I guess. All right, sure. But these introductions like this just feel weird. And that's like when you're away from the hype, away from the event, away from like this, like months down the line, you're rewatching this movie for like the 100th time. They stop the movie for it. They stop the story progressing. They just kind of stop. I mean, they could have introduced these characters any kind of way, like MJ or Ned being chased, or MJ and Ned needing help, and they meet Amazing Spider-Man in a dark alley and he helps them out, thinking it's Peter Parker, but it's, you know, the other Peter Parker. Same thing with Tobey Maguire. It's like, if you like followed them after like that, like there's a whole thing you could do to kind of tie into the flow of the story, but I kind of just feel like they get kind of like stop to get that fan reaction, be like, yeah, we're giving you what you want, guys. Here you go. Fans and nerds, eat that shit up. They're always like, oh, yes, please. Give me more. Give me more. This is like my one flaw, where they just try to get that fan reaction. They try to get that thing, and they really try to like grab it, because they know it works. It fucking works. But in a storytelling perspective, it's like you're stopping just to make it happen, and you just try to rope it in. It just doesn't feel natural. And that's my one flaw with this. Like, I love it. I love seeing them. I'm glad they're in this movie. I love that they exist. I love the scene. But overall, I'm just like, they could have just tied it into the story. It's not a big deal, but it's just a reoccurring thing that always happens. I'm sick of it. Also, this damn circle, this damn magic circle, bringing people in. Stop it. You did it already. No more. And the final fight with this movie, with all three Spider-Men working together to fight the Sinister Five, the Fearful Five, I don't know. All five of them bitches. And we actually see all the Spider-Man working together to develop serums to actually help, using their science and knowledge and intelligence, which you don't really get to see a lot of that in the MCU Spider-Man. I mean, he mostly just uses Stark Tech to click some buttons like, woo, but he's actually, you know, using his mind, using his knowledge, using his intelligence that you've never seen before. He's doing that with all three of the Peter Parkers. They had the scene with the organic web fluid, which everybody knew. I'm just like, I love it. I love the banter between them. You feel like there's like a brotherly connection there. Three people who are close together. Family members just working together, and I'm like, I love this. The final fight was good. It kind of feels like if they were wrapping it up, you're like, all right, let's just like, you know, get these people cured and everything, get out the way, because they want the real showdown between the Green Goblin. It's so well choreographed, and you see the brutality of Tom Holland wanting to actually kill the Green Goblin. Tobey Maguire steps in to stop him from doing it. He doesn't want him to corrupt his moral compass. Willem Dafoe stabs him. I'm like nothing about this part is flawed. It's so good. Like, this is the way to end a final fight. The gasp I let out. No. My boy, I was so relieved that he's just like, yeah, I've been stabbed before. Best reaction. I was with one of my other friends and he was just like, oh, I don't get why they didn't kill him. And I'm like, it's the end of the movie and it's like the oldest Spider-Man. They know they're not gonna kill Tobey Maguire. There's so many feelings behind that. You really felt for Tom Holland wanting revenge for Aunt May. You really felt it. And Green Goblin didn't give a fucking shit. He wanted to die. He wanted Peter Parker to try to kill him. Someone compared it to like a lot of Joker stuff. How the Green Goblin is. Iconic villains are kind of gonna start to bleed together at some point, but I loved it. But what I really felt, what really made me feel the most, where it's like, this is the future of Spider-Man. This is where it's beginning. What sold me on Tom Holland was the first fight with him and Willem Dafoe and the death of Aunt May. That sold me on him. But what sold me for this series was the next step. The fact that Peter Parker sacrificed everyone's memory of him, his existence in general, saved not only like the Earth, but also the multiverse as well too. That is so Peter Parker. That is so something that he would do. He would do the self-sacrifice because like he felt like it's his fault. That's why. Because he felt like it's his fault. Because he feels so guilt-stricken with everything that has happened because of him. He felt like the best solution is for everyone to forget him. I'm like, this is it. This is him. This is the guy. I see him now. Just like the goodbyes with Ned and Zendaya and as MJ, and it just really, it hurts even more. MJ says, I love you, and then she says, say it next time you see me, and you think just like, okay, maybe like there's some glimmer of hope and everything. When everyone's memories reset and he sees MJ and she doesn't remember him at all, I'm just like, yo. He saw the bandage on her head. It made him realize why he has the dual identity, why he does the Spider-Man thing. It's just like the people close to him are gonna eventually get hurt. And that's where he chooses not to say anything to her. Chooses to just let her go and walk away. And that is so hard and so good. And oh my god. So crazy because you don't know how the future of Spider-Man is gonna work now. Because like, you know, there's no Aunt May. So he's just going solo completely. He's sewing his own suit and it looks so good. They're bringing it back to basics. We're doing it, guys. I was so fucking hyped with this ending. I'm like, oh, it's a Spider-Man movie, guys. Call the paper. Call the Daily Bugle. We're here. And you also don't know what goes on with these characters. Like, is Ned gonna come back? Is he gonna be replaced by Harry Osborn now in future movies? MJ, are they gonna have that on and off again thing? Or is he gonna like keep missing her meetings or missing dates with her because of him being Spider-Man? We don't know. It's a whole thing. But I do gotta say, one thing about like the forget me spell where I'm just like, I can't think too much about this. I'm like, what? You think, I was like, okay, so people know Spider-Man already. Like, he's still established. Everything with Spider-Man is canon. Okay, cool. But I know they forget that Peter Parker is Spider-Man and forget Peter Parker's existence, because we see that with like Happy even asking like who he is when he's going to Aunt May's grave, which I'm like, oof, that's sad. Because Happy even mentions like he knew Aunt May through Spider-Man, so I guess through I guess from the event that he did for Aunt May for Feast in the second movie. Does MJ and Ned remember their interactions with Spider-Man now? Like, do they still remember that they helped Spider-Man, that Spider-Man saved them during the Italy trip, or is that our erased now too? Because clearly it's still canon that Spider-Man still interacted with these people, because Happy even said it. Do they know Spider-Man but not know Peter Parker now? Like, I need more details. I need more information. So this movie really just like kind of like sets up for the next series of Spider-Man movies, and I think they already signed on for 3, and I'm excited for it. Even when Civil War happened and Spider-Man came on, I'm just like, okay, how are they gonna do this? And then I saw it and I'm like, and this is like the whole event movie bullshit I talked about before, where they literally just roped him in for some fucking reason, brought him into the movie where he had no point of being there, and they were just like, okay, Spider-Man's here, and then he's done. Why was he here, though? For fan service? He had no reason of being here. He could have just had his own movie and had his own introduction. That would have made sense. Maybe just have Peter Parker show up as, like, a cameo, but making him a part of something that led to nothing, it's just like, why do it? Wasn't excited for Homecoming then. Saw Homecoming, basically Iron Man 3.5. I'm like, why is this a thing? It could have been anyone in a Stark suit. I'm surprised it wasn't the freaking little kid from Iron Man 3. That kid in a new Stark suit would have been the same movie. Barely a difference. Saw Far From Home, like, alright, that's pretty good. Can't really complain that much about it. Doesn't make that much sense when you think about it. But, alright, fine. But this movie gets me fucking excited for whatever Spider-Man thing they have in the future. I'm like, yo, MCU, you got me. You got me on that fan train now. This is how you do it. By taking it back to basics, actually looking at the source material, and actually let's like figure out what fans want and what works for your universe, and applying all of that. Took you long enough. The one thing I'm disappointed about is, the major disappointment I have was the fucking post-credit scene. You finally get Tom Hardy's Venom in it, and you're like, okay, great. This is gonna set up for another movie. They're gonna have a weird breakup, and Venom's gonna go to Spider-Man. It's gonna be a whole thing, and Eddie Brock's trying to get him back. I want that movie. Fucking sends him home. What? Why were you here then? Why did you do it? Why did you tease? Why? And the whole thing was just like, okay, these people came into the universe because they knew Peter Parker was Spider-Man, but they didn't know who Peter Parker was. Why were they brought into the universe then? There's no reason why. There's no connection to Peter Parker. Why were you there? Thanks for setting that up. But they can leave us a little drop of black goo, so I guess that's how we got the symbiote, because a little bit of Venom is now into the MCU. All that for some goo? Little seed of goo. He just seeded, he left his seed, he left. Stupid. I hate it. But it kind of sets up for the next movie. This is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking Kraven the Hunter, and then he's coming in. He's looking for Spider-Man. Black suit. Okay, trying to make things work with MJ, but feeling feeling kind of kinky with the black suit. Fucking Black Cat. Have Black Cat in the next movie. Team up with Black Suit Peter Parker. Have her betray him. He has her best interest in mind. Has no use for Peter Parker anymore. Flirts and leaves. Will it happen? I don't know, but it makes sense to me. This movie had everything. This movie really did. I'm excited to see it in theaters again. I feel like every MCU movie has its flaws that some people choose not to address or choose not to talk about because they're just like, oh, it's the MCU. Oh, it's great. Because it's like fan service the fucking series. This handles well as an actual Spider-Man movie. This handles well as an actual movie. This just handles well. They did it. They actually did something great. Some things I can't stand. Some things I overlook. I didn't even really talk about because they're so minuscule. It's like, all right, I'm not gonna nitpick this movie. I know some people like to see that. They're like, nah. What's the flaws with this movie? What's everything that's wrong with this movie? I had a good time. I enjoyed it. It was bad. Yo, I'd be talking about it for days. I mean, yes, was it slow at some parts? Yeah, especially during the rehabilitation scene where the villains just kind of handled in stasis for the most part and just there. The freaking scene where they form that coup at the very end. Sure, okay, these things are just kind of happening. Even how they sidelined the lizard, like, what are we gonna do with them? Leave them in the truck. Oh, we're doing the coup now? Lizard comes out. I'm like, okay. The movie didn't know what to do with the lizard. No one knows what to do with the lizard. He just wanted to turn people to lizards. That's like, why? Change his story arc. It's just a beautiful movie and it plays so much well homage to all the Spider-Man movies and media that came before it. Really pays tribute to Andrew Garfield. It sets everyone up to like have like their own story arc finished and concluded. Tobey's Spider-Man finally settled in with MJ, which was the entire plot of the series. Andrew Garfield, after the death of Emma Stone, he even said he'd stop pulling his punches, seek the whole revenge thing. And if you remember from Amazing Spider-Man 1, when he becomes a ruthless vigilante because Dark Knight came out and they wanted money and they're like, okay, let's make Spider-Man Batman, I guess, sure. Then maybe he goes back and actually meets that MJ in that universe, because let's face it, it's always going to be MJ or Gwen Stacy. That's the two people he's going to be with. Peter Parker has dated, like what, like canonically over 11 girls, but like the people he goes back to, or the people everyone always thinks of, like MJ and Gwen Stacy. That's it. Maybe Felicia Hardy sometimes, but that's about it. One thing I kind of like, I liked but I didn't like was like, because I love the banter between Andrew, Tobey, and Tom. It was great. The one thing that kind of bothered me was that they kind of confirmed that there's not a lot of like alternate superheroes in their dimensions. Like they didn't know what the Avengers were. They kind of like questioned like if there's like other super people. But I'm just like, okay, if I remember quite well in the first Tobey Maguire movies, they do reference a couple of heroes. You see like small references and Easter eggs. They even mention Doctor Strange exists. When they're naming Doc Ock, they're like, oh, that's good, but it's taken. The other people exist. I mean, maybe they don't like form a team of the Avengers. It's just kind of weird that they kept whatever's canon from the movies itself, like internally, but never expanded on the universe. Just like, okay, maybe things exist outside what we know in the movies, or maybe things actually are there. I mean, it worked for a joke and I got a ha-ha, hee-hee, tee-hee from it, but it's just weird how like they just kept everything so centered, just like, okay, so Amazing Spider-Man universe is only Spider-Man, that's it. There's only Tobey Maguire and that's it. So like, it would have been like interesting if they mentioned just like, okay, things existing, especially movies at that time that came out. Originally, they were gonna have the X-Men tie into the Tobey Maguire movies. Pretty sure the first iteration of the Hulk also happened from that universe. Why are you like this? But yeah, they're like, nah, you ain't got no rights to no Avengers. We do, bitch. It's just you there, you lonely bitch. But anyway, guys, I'm exhausted. This movie excited me. I'm losing my voice. I have a light right in my face. If you're a Spider-Man fan or a fan of comic books in general, this really gets that feeling. I don't have to say it to you because probably you've already seen it a couple of times. You've seen it multiple times. There's nothing more I can say that hasn't already been said about this movie, and that is saying a lot. It's not the absolute, complete, perfect movie, but honestly, there's not a lot of movies that are. Maybe Spider-Verse. For all the material they had that came before it, and everything that ties in and what makes Spider-Man Spider-Man, it has in this movie, and it works so well. And I'm really happy and proud of it. I think it's an amazing director, amazing cast, amazing script, amazing screenplay, and I'm just really I'm proud of this movie. It feels like my own child. I'm like, that's my baby, and I'm so proud. Thank you guys so much for watching. I know this was really long. If you want to support me, leave a comment on what videos you want me to watch or review. I'm gonna get more into movie reviews. I am gonna make that Spider-Man video about the best live action Spider-Man that's gonna come, and also the 100th episode of Riverdale, because I haven't seen Riverdale since like the end of season 2, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? What? So I'll see you guys later. Stay awesome. Bye.